Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find the solution? Where does the nudge come from to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? The intention of this podcast is to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I am the founder of Catalyst Sale. This podcast episode, as all of the episodes are brought to you by the Catalyst Game Plan. It is really about simplifying execution, helping you get better at goal setting and execution through clarity and focus, building out those systems. I thought I'd do something a little bit different today. I wanted to just turn the mic on and share some specific failures. And this is going to be the beginning of a series of these episodes if the feedback is positive. If you like this, I'd love to hear what you think about the approach. I thought, do I interview myself as we go through this? And I thought that might be a little bit awkward. And I thought, well, do I just chat into the microphone? And that might be a little bit awkward. So we're going to see how this goes. But I'm going to share 3 failures today. The first failure I'm going to share is around the first time I was put on a performance improvement plan. So we'll call that my first PIP. The second one is around hiring and firing. Hiring a team, building a team, and then having to let that team go because I made a mistake. I had a failure. I could have done something better. And the third one that I want to get into is a failure to lead. I'm going to not get into the details around which organizations they were a part of. If you're familiar with my background, you might be able to figure out or do some pattern matching, but that's not the point. The point here are the experiences that I went through, the lessons learned, and hopefully lessons you might learn for yourself. So the first time I was put on a performance improvement plan, I remember when my boss called me and told me that he was going to put me on the performance improvement plan. And he started the conversation with, I don't think you're having fun here. And we'd only worked with each other for a period of time. And there must have been something in my demeanor and the way that I was interacting that indicated that I wasn't having fun and that we just weren't meshing. The follow-up was the thing that bothered me more than anything else, though. And the follow-up was, I'm going to put you on a plan, but we know how this is going to work out. It just isn't, no matter whether you're successful or you're not, you really should be looking for another job. And I don't think that's the way that you put people on plans. And I've put a couple of people on plans since then. I've always thought about that when having to go to this level. And ultimately, a plan should not be something that someone is surprised by. Now, the reality from a failure perspective is I shouldn't have been surprised that I was put on a plan. My numbers weren't there. I wasn't great at keeping track of things inside our CRM at the time. There wasn't a high level of clarity of where the opportunities were going to come from. And I also did not do a very good job when onboarding the new leader into the organization, meaning onboarding this new leader in a way that made sense. Now, what was funny is we competed with each other before he joined the organization. Turnover in leadership, change in leadership style, lack of performance on my end led to a PIP. What did I do? Well, so the failure was getting myself into a point where I was put on the PIP. The area that I succeeded in is I found another job while going through that process, and at the same time was able to bring on or grow a couple of customers. So the story. Be honest with yourself about your performance and how you're projecting the impact of that performance onto others. When you're not performing well, you're not asking for help, and you're not meshing well with leadership inside an organization, it's a very short time period before you start to really look like you're not the right fit inside the organization. And actually, the organization may no longer be the right fit for you. And that ultimately was the case. I was fortunate. My career took off after that. I mean, I went through a little bit of a downtime, and it's always hurts to leave an organization and be let go. But my point on this failure is even with failure, you can find opportunity to grow and move forward. So just to recap, my first PIP. I was put on the PIP because I didn't create a really good relationship with my boss. I wasn't performing the level of the capabilities that I should have been relative to the number. And I did not communicate very well what the future opportunities looked like. Ultimately, it worked out in the end because it was one of the best things that happened to me in my career. So there's one failure. Second failure, hiring and firing. Back when co-founder and I launched this business, one of the clients we took on was really close to the business that we were in previously. And we couldn't work with this client and continue to operate in the other business. And the biggest failure I made in this process is I was so focused on what I wanted, which was this opportunity to grow another business, rather than looking into the details of the business that the client that we're getting ready to take on. And I justified this when I did the initial review of the platform, saying that the platform had good bones. And the platform did. The platform had good bones. It solved for a problem that was needed in the marketplace. We were all bought into it. The reality was I did not take the time to go through and put it through all of the paces, and then also figure out how things had changed inside the platform over the course of the last couple of months. Big challenge that I ran into from a failure perspective. I made an assumption based on an initial assessment that was clouded by a level of bias relative to my interest in joining the organization and getting really excited, bringing this client on and getting really excited about what it meant for the future. So much so that I bypassed some obvious challenges inside the platform and went through the process of hiring a team. We hired that team quickly, and within 90 days we had a team of people contacting prospects, initiating sales cycles, and then quickly we realized that the platform couldn't do the thing that it was intended to do. Ultimately, we missed on our numbers, and we had to start letting people go. So the failure here was hiring and firing, and it all could have been resolved had I been more deliberate in the due diligence that I put the platform through and the paces that I put the platform through. The second thing I could have done differently is I could have really pushed for market feasibility relative to the platform and testing before actually going and hiring. And the commitment I've made since then is I will never make that mistake again. We'll never overhire without an understanding of what's happening in the market. And ultimately what that's done is it's made it so that I'm not the right fit for every organization, and that's fine. I am not going to impact other people's livelihood, their career, by going in and hiring people because we need to get into a number and start generating revenue when we don't really understand if the product is ready for the market or the market is ready for the product. So lesson learned from that one is be deliberate in the testing, be careful about confirmation bias, and the biases that will get in the way of clouding judgment, and make sure that as part of your process you are doing that validation of market feasibility before you start growing, especially in an emerging tech area. So we went through my first PIP, we went through hiring and firing, and then the third failure was a little bit more recent, and this was a failure to lead. And what I realized in this one is I got myself so caught up and trapped in trying to do too much, trying to do so much stuff in the day-to-day perspective, not being aware, situationally aware, self-aware of where I was better served to spend time, energy, and attention relative to my circadian rhythm, the timing where I'm best focused on doing deep work. And I got myself into a trap working inside an organization where we had a significant time zone challenge between us. There was about 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours, depending on time of year. And allowed myself to fall into the trap of being in meetings during really productive hours during the morning where I would have been doing deep work, and then just being completely fried by the time everybody else on the team wrapped up their day. So I just did not lead myself from the perspective of protecting my time so that I was there for the team when the team needed me, and I was there for the work when the work needed me, and I was there for the business when the business needed me. This failure to lead started with a failure to lead self. Failure to lead self. And if you're interested in getting deep into leadership of self, leadership of another, leadership of teams, leadership of organization, you've heard me talk about them before. Dan Cockrell's book, How is the Culture in Your Kingdom, is phenomenal. And I recommend it to anyone. And if there's anybody who's listening who'd like a copy of it, I've got a couple of copies and I'm happy to send those out. Just let me know that you heard this episode. I've got 3 copies that I can send out. And if it goes a little bit longer than that, then I'll get connected with Dan. We'll see if we can do something a little bit different there. But this failure to lead self, failure to assess, failure to manage my time effectively got me into this spiral that ultimately I wasn't able to operate or perform as the leader that I expect out of somewhat of my capability. So as we go through the themes here, I think the thing that's really important relative to each of these failures is, there were outside circumstances and other things that were involved in the process that impacted. And you could come through and there are some people who might say that I was being too hard on myself in each of those 3 areas, because from a performance perspective, I'd been with the first organization for a long period of time, had a really strong reputation, and ultimately I still ended up going on to my first PIP and was out. From ability to help the organization solve the problems that we were brought into, we hired that team quickly and we started doing work with customers, and we just realized the market wasn't ready for what we were doing, and the product wasn't really ready for the market. And then the third one, from a time zone perspective, it's really tough to lead an extended team in a virtual environment, in that kind of environment. But those to me are all things that I could push out to somebody else. Ultimately, when it comes back to me directly, how these failures have informed the way that I approach my work. Number 1, set expectations and execute flawlessly. Be very, very clear about the expectations that you're setting and do all the work to execute against those. And I still today miss on this. And one of my biggest struggles is documentation and getting that documentation out to people in a timely manner. So I'm working on that. Net, just to pull this together, it's okay to fail. When you fail, it is also imperative that you pick yourself up, that you take some time to reflect and assess what you could have done better, where your opportunities for growth are, and you put yourself in a position where you don't make those same mistakes over and over again. So what's my process? My process is this. I gather data, conduct research. So I pull information together. Level of self-awareness. I've had people tell me that self-awareness is a superpower. Sometimes it's a superpower, sometimes it's debilitating. But I gather data, conduct research. Once I've got the data together, I've taken the time to get notes and put all of the information together. You can do this in the context of a post-mortem. Then I assess that data. Review the data, get an understanding of kind of what's the reality of the data, what's real, what's not. Then I figure out, okay, what could I have done better? What do I not want to do again? And how can I start testing new approaches inside the marketplace? And if you just take that time to gather the information, reflect on it, assess it, identify areas to test, you will learn from failure and you will move forward. In my experience, everybody makes mistakes and everybody has failed. And in a lot of cases, the things that they talk about publicly are the successes. And I know a number of people are talking a little bit more about failure today, and I think that's good. I think it's good for people to know that they're not alone. So at the risk of rambling and going any deeper, I'm going to stop right here and say, number one, thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of Find My Catalyst in the whole podcast, listening to all the episodes that we've done up until this point. Thanks for the support that you've given to the show. And if there are any questions that come up as a result of this, please let me know, either via direct message or directly on the social media channels. I'm happy to go deeper. If I didn't go deep enough, let me know. If I went too deep and started rambling, let me know that too. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process? Thank you.